Okay. Welcome in. It is Monday. So much for us to talk about. A full week in front of us, and I am just getting settled into these Through the Haze live shows. So they're going to continue getting better, continue getting bigger. I can't wait. But we have got a lot we need to talk about. One of the biggest battles in the class of 2024 comes to a head today as five-star defensive lineman Williams Nwaneri out the state of Missouri chooses between the Missouri Tigers and the Oklahoma Sooners. Something we've talked about extensively here on the channel, something we're going to need to keep talking about. Another thing we have got to turn our attention to is the new NIL law in Missouri. I've seen a lot of talk about it on social media. We're going to turn our attention to it, talk about it, and try and weed through and see what we can't figure out. After that, we need to turn our attention to the SEC, where multiple programs had scrimmages over the weekend. We need to talk about some injury news, some things Nick Saban said that stood out to me, and then give our prediction on how some of these SEC teams will fare. And of course, through all that, we're going to be hitting comments, but we need to start with a win that the Oklahoma Sooners got this weekend for four-star wide receiver Jaden Nickens out the state of Oklahoma. Now, he's in the class of 2025, but this is still a win that Oklahoma fans need to be very excited about. Jaden Nickens stands 6'3", 180 pounds or 190 pounds per the 24/7 Sports composite. And whenever you watch what he brings to the table, there's good reason why he's a top 150 player in the nation going in to his junior year. This is a guy that's going to continue developing on the football field, going to continue developing in the strength and conditioning room. This is a phenomenal addition. And one of the things that I love that Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners staff have done here recently is really try and lock up their own borders. There's a good amount of talent in the state of Oklahoma, and Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners are making sure they can try and keep them home. Now, you're not going to keep all of the talent in your state home. That's just not feasible. Recruiting is far too national, but it's about winning the battles you can't afford to lose. And one of the position groups we've talked about extensively, I know everybody turns their attention to defensive line, and deservedly so. That's the biggest need for Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners. But we also have to be cognizant that it's not the only need the Sooners have. Heck, going into this season, one of the questions I have for Oklahoma is what will your passing offense look like? You lost a lot in terms of yards. You lost a lot in terms of production. Now, you did some very good things in the offseason. You got some guys out the transfer portal, but more importantly, in my opinion, you got a wide receiver coach that has been on fire on the trail. And I think those results are going to follow onto the football field, to where he is going to be tenacious. He is going to make sure those guys come out prepared. I'm just interested in seeing what it looks like. But it makes complete sense to me that Oklahoma has turned their attention so ferociously to wide receiver recruiting. They got some wins out the transfer portal, but now let's get some wins in the recruiting department, get them in here, have them for 3 to 4 years, and develop them ourselves. I love that mindset. And Emmett Jones has been such a bright spot for the Oklahoma Sooners coaching staff. In my opinion, easily one of the best hires that Brent Venables has made. And we're going to go through the list of guys he's gotten in. But one thing we also need to acknowledge is that if we look at the class of 2025, which, by the way, with the addition of Nickens, they now have 5 guys in the class of 2025, a class that ranks number 4 in the nation for that cycle. Now, I get it. A long ways to go between now and there. We're still focused on the class of 2024, but 3 out of the 5 guys committed in that class are wide receivers. You have 4-star Nickens, you have 4-star Elijah Thomas, and you have 3-star Grayson Harris. So Oklahoma knew they had a need, knew they wanted to answer that need, and have attacked it. And it's not just relegated to the class of 2025. They attacked it in the class of 2024. They attacked it in the transfer portal. They looked at the team and said, okay, this is where we have got to get better. We lost a lot of production. Marvin Mims isn't there anymore. Theo Weiss isn't there anymore. Your tight end isn't there anymore, and he was a big piece of that offense, and Eric Gray isn't there anymore. And yes, Eric Gray didn't get as involved in the passing game as I thought he would under Jeff Lebby, but they did use Eric Gray to open up the passing game. Now, transitioning from Eric Gray is probably what I'm least concerned about in terms of Oklahoma's offense, because you have 2 guys right behind him that are very gifted, showed how talented they were during that Florida State game. And in the case of Javonte Barnes, he had almost 580 yards last year behind Eric Gray, who had over 1,000 yards last year. I mean, Javonte Barnes is a very capable running back. So OU feels good about the running back room, plus the additions they got. But it's awesome to see a team figure out what they need, in Oklahoma's case, wide receiver, and then go attack it. If we look at the additions that Emmett Jones has made since he's been there, it's actually insane. If we look at the class of 2024, Zion Kearney out of Missouri City, Texas, a top 100 player in the nation. We keep going down. Ivan Carrion from Odessa, right? 6'6", 196 pounds. Huge win for the Oklahoma Sooners. In that same area where Emmett Jones just got done coaching from Texas Tech. We continue. Zion Raggins from Georgia, a guy who this past weekend put social media on notice as he returned the first kickoff all the way back for a touchdown. This guy is an explosive playmaker. I have some people out in that area in Georgia, and they were telling me this dude right here is different. In fact, I was told heading into this week, expect Zion Raggins to possibly rise up the board if he continues looking the way he did in that first game. It's not done, though. We can continue. We can continue going down to KJ Daniels, a 3-star wide receiver. We can continue to Dozie Azunkanma, a 3-star wide receiver. You get the point I'm trying to make, though, and we haven't even addressed what Emmett Jones has done in the transfer portal. Emmett Jones came in here and gave the Sooners instant production in an area where instant production was required. Now, we don't know what it's going to look like on the football field, but OU had a need. They lost a lot of talented wide receivers. Yes, they have talented wide receivers on roster, but now Emmett Jones has identified the guys he wants to add in, that he likes coaching and that he thinks will fit into this Jeff Lebby offense, and he has attacked the trail ferociously. Emmett Jones might be one of the best hires that Brent Venables has made for several reasons. What he has done on the trail, what I believe he will do once the season gets here, and more importantly, maintaining a pipeline in the state of Texas. Now, Oklahoma is a team that didn't have to work particularly hard to maintain that pipeline just because of proximity, because of history. They're going to be in the state of Texas, but the point remains. Anything you can do to grant yourself more legitimacy is something you absolutely do. And if you already have a pitch that's viewed with legitimacy, why wouldn't you just sprinkle a little bit on it? That's exactly what they did with Emmett Jones. I think it's a phenomenal hire. I understand Jaden Nickens a ways out. That's not the battle that Oklahoma fans are focused on today. As there's a 2024 battle that's happening today that we're going to talk about, but it deserves attention because he's a very talented player. He's a guy that other schools are going to chip away at. They are going to stay after him because he is that gifted. But Oklahoma and Emmett Jones have been on a roll on the trail, especially with wide receivers, an area that I talked about in probably January or February. Someone in the chat let me know whenever I put out that video, and I was saying, hey, I'm not saying you need to be concerned. I'm not saying you need to hit the alarm bells. Oklahoma lost a lot of production in the wide receiver room, and not a lot of people are talking about it. Now, in fairness, like I said, they have done a sensational job at getting talent to the transfer portal, getting talent in the recruiting classes, and hiring a guy that they feel confident will continue that line of talent. Let's hit some comments before we go on to our next topic. Daryl says, Boomer, hey, man, good win for the Sooners. Eric, happy you're in here. You said, Ty, maybe I told you your buddy Unfair Sports about was going to commit. We'll see. Yeah, look, we're about to talk about Winery. That's going to get very interesting. SBC Bates, thank you for joining in. He says, if it's about being close to home, it'll be Mizzou. If it's about being developed and competitive, he'll go to Oklahoma. Either way, he will be a freak, and I hope he succeeds. Bates, if everybody took this approach whenever their favorite team, and granted, I must admit, I brag on y'all all the time. I do truly to other content creators, to people actually in college football whenever I get to talk to them. I brag on this community all the time because Bates, unfortunately, when you go on social media, this is the minority of takes where people are like, hey, wish you would have came to my school, but glad you're going through the process. Hope you have a phenomenal career. I'll be rooting for you wherever it is. That's not usually the majority of takes on social media, but I can say this, that seems to be the majority of takes here on this channel. That's something I am very, very happy with, right? Because this is the take. Oklahoma trying to maintain that competitive balance. We know what Todd Bates has done in development, but you can't argue that there is something to saying, I'd like to stay home. And if that's the case, it really doesn't matter, right? Like there are some guys who you can be in their state and you can be after them and you can give them the perfect pitch. And they can say, you know what? I want to see something different. I want to go out of these states' boundaries. There's nothing you could have done. Nothing. And if a kid wants to stay close to home, well, he wants to stay close to home. We're also going to talk about the Missouri NIL law because it is fascinating to me. We're going to get into all that. Chicken says, good morning. Hey, Chicken, glad you could be here. Adjust the Hat 7 says Nickens will most likely be a 5-star. Not a wild take, Adjust the Hat. Not at all. Any guy that is rated in about that top 120 range, especially coming out of their sophomore season. Coming out of your sophomore season, if you're a top 120 player in high school football, yeah, you're not going to shock me if you're like, hey, that guy has an argument to be a 5-star when it's all said and done, because they've proven it. Look where they're ranked. He's 6'3". He's 190 pounds. He's still going to be in the weight room. He's still going to be developing his technique as a route runner, as a wide receiver, his understanding of coverage. I mean, he's only going to get better. So absolutely, Nickens is a phenomenal prospect. And I'll tell you what's wild, Adjust the Hat. We're going on a little bit of a tangent, but that's what we do here. What's wild about Nickens is that he's rated, what did I say, 118 in the country? 119 in the country. I apologize. He's 119 in the country, 6'3", 190 pounds, but the class of 2025 is so loaded with wide receivers. He's the number 20 wide receiver in the nation. You need wide receivers. The class of 2025 is for you, my friend. Let me tell you what. Defensive lineman, the class of 2024 has you covered. You need some wide receivers. Look ahead to the class of 2025. They are loaded. By the way, stick around. We will be talking about the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2025 and why you should know the name, Ryan Williams. We're going to be talking about that very, very shortly. Let's hit some more comments and then head on. We see Eric saying, roll tide. Robert, let him live his life on his terms. Zion going to be a starter. He is nasty. Nasty. I actually don't know about the kickers, man. Chicken, you got to realize, me being an Alabama fan growing up, I got jaded with kickers. It was the wildest thing during the Nick Saban tenure, up until Reichard, obviously. But, like, you had all the best players usually across the board, and then a kicker who was inconsistent through and through. So I became of the mindset, forget field goals, let's just score touchdowns. Now, that's not feasible, right? That's obviously a joke. I'm being facetious, but we'll talk about that this evening. Van Edwards says, roll tide and good morning, Tide. Good morning, Van. Ryan Wingo says, Ryan Wingo looks to be going to Missouri as well. Yep, Ryan Wingo, Missouri, that's one we've got to watch. Texas going to try and put together something to keep him leaning to the horns. That's going to be one we have to watch, Eric. I'm interested to see what Texas can do to try and get back in that battle, but no doubt Missouri, they're cognizant about trying to keep guys home. We're going to talk about that. So, all right, let's go on to, let's stay in this wheelhouse, right? Because we're talking about Missouri right now. Today, a battle comes to a head. A battle that everybody in college football, if you follow recruiting, you should be watching for the number 1 defensive lineman, the number 3 player per the 24/7 Sports Composite, Williams Nwaneri. Someone who I believe is one of the premier talents in this class. And you don't have to take my word for it. You don't become the number 3 player in a class without being one of the premier talents. But even before he was rated as the number 3 player, and granted, he was still a 5-star, so it's not like it's a clairvoyant moment for me. The versatility he brings to the table is really notable whenever we're talking about Williams Nwaneri. And I think that's one of the big reasons why so many teams were after him. I mean, you saw Georgia pushing, doing everything they could to try and garner his attention. You saw Tennessee try and really get involved in this battle. Missouri doing what they do, and Missouri's doing what they should do. If he's in your state, you do everything you can to have him leave, or to not have him leave. I apologize. Because, and we're going to talk about all the reasons why, but you just can't afford it if you're Missouri. You can't afford to have talent like that walk out of your state and go to a team who next year you'll be seeing. You can't afford that. Not when Eli Drinkowitz isn't on a hot seat per se, but I think we can all agree here that the seat is warm. I think at the very least, that's a fair assessment. Wouldn't you agree? It's not a hot seat, but the seat is certainly warm. If Missouri doesn't have a good year this year, well, we could be talking about that being a hot seat. Oh, there's no doubt about it. That seat could go from warm to hot real quick. Real quick. And so this is something we have to watch. What does Missouri do this year? If Williams Nwaneri is to commit to Missouri, how does Missouri play this year? If they're a team that's improving, like they don't have to win 10 games. They don't. But if they show, hey, there's a reason you need to be excited about committing here. We are moving in the right direction, and we feel like you're the catalyst that will take us there. Well, that's a legitimate pitch. I mean, we've talked about that pitch here on the channel several times. That's a pitch that actually makes sense. It holds legitimacy. I can understand that one. But if Missouri goes out there and has a real tough year, it doesn't look good. Nothing is working. We could be sitting here in 4 or 5 months having a totally different conversation about the future of Eli Drinkowitz with this program. So that's something we do have to keep in mind. I know that's a long ways out, and a lot of the times these prospects aren't thinking that far ahead because it is so much of an unknown. I think it would be a good idea to think about it that hard because it is so much of an unknown. But it is something we get to discuss because that's what we do. This is a fan channel. We get to do these things. If it's not Missouri, it's going to be Oklahoma, right? I know we said Tennessee, Georgia involved in this battle, but the two teams you need to know are Missouri, Oklahoma. Missouri really trying to keep him home, leveraging their new NIL law, which we are about to talk about. Oklahoma has Todd Bates. Oklahoma has the ability to say, hey, we like where we're moving in 98% of the team. The 2% where we still need help just so happens to be the defensive line. Like that's an area where we're really still needing to get those SEC guys coming in. That's you. That's the pitch Oklahoma gets to deliver to Williams Nwaneri. That's you. You are, once again, almost similar to Missouri, but not the same. It's a pitch of granting them something they didn't have before. For Oklahoma, they get to pitch that you could genuinely be a piece or two away from us being a power. For Missouri, it's you are the guy that can get the ball rolling. So it is two different pitches sharing some analogous features. But at the end of the day, we need to understand what Oklahoma offers. Oklahoma moving to the SEC, so he will get to play in the SEC. It's not super far away from home. You also have Todd Bates there. Now, Todd Bates at Clemson architected some phenomenal defensive lines, but one thing I've talked about at length, one of the reasons why I really like Todd Bates played for the Crimson Tide. Heck, I'm on the Bama Standard every Tuesday night. Would love to see you over there, by the way, tomorrow. The Final Whistle with Matt Caddell, Dan, Chris James, Justin Riley, Coach Smook, and myself. We would love to have you over there talking all things Alabama football. Last week we had college football legend and NFL legend George Teague on, and he got to tell us about the time he hit T.O. off the star. That was awesome. You don't want to miss it. Point being, some of those guys were on campus for Bama whenever Todd Bates was there. Jay was with us on Friday evening after the stream closed, and Justin told Jay, man, I'm so jealous, right? Like Todd Bates is a guy that I've always wanted to come back to Alabama. Now, granted, Bama fans, Freddie Roach is that dude, right? Nobody is saying Freddie Roach needs to leave. Freddie Roach, if he wants to stay at Alabama, my word. Freddie Roach, the number one recruiter last year, phenomenal recruiter, has been able to do great things with the defensive line. Interested to see what it looks like whenever Kevin Steele gets a more pressing, hard-nosed defense back there. But Todd Bates, what he did at Clemson, you can't argue with it. We know what that Brent Venables defense was at the Clemson Tigers, no doubt about it. But a big reason that defense was as effective as it was is that defensive front absolutely wreaking havoc upon offensive lines. If they weren't making the play, they were the reason the play was made. And that's being a defensive lineman. You're going to be an unsung hero. People will talk about the linebackers. They'll talk about the safeties. They'll talk about the defensive backs. Very few are going to talk about the big boys in the trenches really laying the work. We know what this Brent Venables defense can do. It's a very, very aggressive defense. Venables loves to pin his ears back and says, show me. You know what I'm sending at you. Show me you can beat it. That's going to work if he has the defensive line to be able to create havoc. But if that defensive line isn't creating havoc, if they're not opening up holes for linebackers to get to, it's creating a mess up in the flow of timing. You're Linebackers are blitzing. They're not getting home quick enough, and they're hitting the open space right where the linebackers were or where the cheetah just came from. They're going to dump the ball right there. So much of this defense relies on that defensive front. You have a coach who has proven that he can do it. You got some guys out the transfer portal. I think Jay was telling us that last year Oklahoma didn't have one or two guys over 300 pounds on that defensive line. Now there's like 5 or 6. So that right there alone is going to be a massive help. Just getting the increase in size. That won't fix it, but it certainly is a great place to start. But that's why Williams Nwaneri is so important. That's why David Stone is so important. That's why Nigel Smith is so important. That's why Zadavian Sims, when he committed to Oregon, we made a video and said, hey, this isn't the end of it for Oklahoma. They're still after several defensive linemen. But every time you go into a battle and you don't come out on top for that defensive lineman, it makes every single battle for the remaining defensive linemen that much more important. And if Williams Nwaneri today is to pick Missouri over Oklahoma, is it the end of the world, Oklahoma fans? No. Because one, you'll still pursue him until ink hits paper, as you should. As you should. Brent Venables, they will still be calling him until ink hits paper, as they should. But two, every battle you're in for a Nigel Smith, David Stone, those two cats right there become must land. Not, oh, well, we need to. No. If you don't win the battle for Williams Nwaneri, David Stone, in every sense of the word, becomes a must-win. Nigel Smith, in every sense of the word, becomes a must-win. Dominic McKinley becomes an incredibly important prospect, a prospect that's already incredibly important. This is the biggest need for Oklahoma in this class, the defensive line. Luckily, there's a lot of talented defensive linemen, and losing out on one of them is not going to be the end of your class, but it certainly increases the importance of all the ones remaining on the board. The last thing you want is to look up and that board be empty. So this is going to be a battle we absolutely have to watch. Now, one of the things I've seen a lot on social media is talking about Missouri's new NIL law, which goes into effect this year. Let's break this down, right? Because I've seen some people make some claims about this law that aren't necessarily true, and then I've seen some people not understanding exactly how the laws work. I need to quote on 3 an article by Keegan Pope. Would highly recommend y'all go check it out. Anybody wants it, I'll link it. But I quote, according to the law, a high school athlete has the right to earn or attempt to earn compensation after signing a written agreement to enroll at a university within the state's borders. Simply put, beginning on September 1st, athletes can start receiving NIL opportunities as soon as they sign a financial aid agreement with the school, which they can do at any time after August 1st, except this year, because the amended law goes into the effect at the end of August. Once again, the quote comes from a phenomenal On3 article by Keegan Pope. Would highly recommend everybody go check it out. It's a phenomenal breakdown, but this is very important. It's not as soon as he commits that he's eligible for NIL. It's as soon as he signs those financial aid agreement papers. He could be eligible, or anybody in the state of Missouri could be eligible for NIL benefits. Now, this is going to be something we have got to watch, because similar to the Texas A&M law, Missouri passed a law stating this is exempt from NCAA oversight, meaning if the NCAA wants to come in here and say, no, you can't do that, athletes have the ability under Missouri law to then open suit against the NCAA for damages, because the NCAA in this instance would be considered a third party, and the law states that no third parties can come in and hinder the deal. Well, we just saw with Texas, and I'm not claiming this is going to happen to Missouri, but this is something we all need to be thinking about before we really dive into what this means for this battle in particular. If I was Missouri, if I was the Tigers, and if I was all of these NIL collectives, I'm not worried about the NCAA. The NCAA has no power right now. None. They hold 0 chips. There's a reason why NIL got to us the way it came, because they realized after the Supreme Court put a target on their back, and Justice Kavanaugh stated your antitrust laws are wild. No other organization in the United States would get away with what you're getting away with, not paying people a fair market wage off the theory that you don't have to pay people a fair market wage. The NCAA knew right there, and NCAA versus Alston, their time was done. Done. So they quickly scrambled together a bill that allowed states to do whatever the hell they wanted with no oversight, no guidance, anything. So now the NCAA got us here, and they don't have the power or legitimacy to fix it, because even if Missouri didn't pass this law, I'm going to give you my opinion on what would have happened. Once again, I'm not an attorney. Never went to law school. The most legal training I have is I do have a business law minor, and I did moot court, which I was trained by actual attorneys in simulated Supreme Court trials, would travel the nation arguing in front of federal judges. In fact, one of the judges I got to argue in front of before he was on the Supreme Court was Gorsuch, I believe. But regardless, so we'd get just my opinion on the matter. Even if Missouri wouldn't have passed that law, the NCAA wouldn't have had the power to open up suit, because they would realize the second they do, someone's going to countersue. That's going to get us right back in front of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. They get to choose what they want. If the NCAA doesn't get the result they want in that initial lawsuit, they're going to put it on the docket to go up to a higher court so that this can actually get codified. That's going to go all the way up to a federal court. And oh yeah, by the way, the Supreme Court just told the NCAA, if you get back here, we're ripping you a new one. It's done. So the NCAA was never going to sue, but now they can't. But you don't need to be worried about the NCAA. You need to be worried about the real NIL daddy out here, because there's an NIL daddy out here. Let's get it understood. And it's not the NCAA. It's the IRS. And you can run, you can hide, but they're going to find you, and they're going to get their cut. We just saw what happened with the 12th Man Plus Foundation, where they had to shut its doors. And we need to understand that they were granted a 501c3. I said it wrong last stream. I don't want to say it wrong again, but I believe they were granted a 501c3. They were granted nonprofit status by the IRS, only for the IRS to sit back in a month or two later say, wait a second, hold on. You're doing what? That's not nonprofit. And now the 12th Man Plus Foundation has shut its doors. I'm not saying that's going to be what happens with Missouri, but I am saying every NIL collective out there, I can guarantee you this, has looked at their books and made sure if the IRS comes knocking, we can turn them over, show them, and feel good about us existing. So the Missouri NIL law is going to change things. Often here on the show, we acknowledge NIL as a part of recruiting, but it's not going to be the main part. This is different, because this allows people to start making money instantly. And like the article I said, and like what I just quoted, he can sign that financial aid agreement anytime. In fact, this reminds me of before NIL came around, JT Tuimalau, where he took his process after the early signing day, after signing day, and ended up committing in July. And the reason he was able to do it is he had signed a financial aid agreement to multiple different institutions, if I'm not mistaken. That way he had a spot. Then he chose Ohio State. So this is something we've got to watch. This doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. If he chooses Missouri or he chooses Oklahoma, everybody will keep after him. But this is going to be something we absolutely have got to keep our eye on. This NIL law, what it means going forward, everything in between. Let's hit some comments. Got to go up. We've missed a lot. Rare Brunch live streams day, bro. Thank you for being in here. By the way, we have switched up the content a little bit. We're going to be doing weekly shows Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Right now, they're 10 to 11. Might change it from 11 to 12, depending on what's best for the people. But yeah, we're going to be doing more structured shows. The live streams Monday and Friday nights, they're still going to be a thing because they're highly interactive with all of the fans, everybody watching. Those are so much fun. We want to keep that. But I do want to do some more structured live shows so that way I get to expand on the teams we're talking about. I get to give you more college football news in a timely period like this. It just expands the amount of content I'm able to provide all of you without making me just sit here and record all day long, right? So I get to use more time to put together better content. So federal law will trump this, and Oklahoma legally will have the same right to pursue and match what Mizzou is offering due to their fade trade agreement by the federal government. Yeah. Look, this is the wild, wild west. There's a lot that is just up in the air right now legally. And that's why whenever this got here, whenever NIL got here, and for those of you that have been around the channel for a while, I must apologize because you have heard me give this soliloquy time and time again about NCAA versus Alston. But the reason I do it is because I think we all need to realize how haphazardly we got here. There are people that have always stated that NIL would be the death of college football, and I firmly disagree with that. I think that it's just another avenue of change within the game. What I will grant you is this: you can kill something by doing some massive sweeping change haphazardly. And I don't think NIL is going to kill college football, but my point is the NCAA did more harm than was necessary with the way they chose to do NIL. They could have done this, and we could be sailing into a sunset right now. All well and good. But they didn't. They sat on their hands. You know who else sat on their hands? The Pac-12. And look what that got the Pac-12. But even if the laws aren't there, we're not giving. Yeah, this is another thing with NIL is like, how much do you offer everybody? What's the split, right? This is why whenever Nick Saban, someone who's been a proponent of NIL for so long, he was talking about, okay, what we eventually need to get to, if we want NIL to truly give us some sort of parity, what we need to get to is basically where every team has a salary cap. And that's an interesting theory to go off of, is the salary cap theory, where every team has the same amount of money and you play around with it. I'm not advocating for it, but I am saying there are some interesting ideas being tossed around the college football NIL sphere, trying to figure out what comes next. Ranked on Michigan, according to On3, OU is the third ranked school in NIL. That'd be interesting. The way you explain the politics and stuff, we can come. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it, Chicken. Monty, as always, Monty, my guy, thank you for being in here. Guys, Monty, one of the best Oklahoma personalities on Twitter. Genuinely, if you're not following him, Monty, I have to admit, I have to stay off of Twitter a lot of the times because I see your tweets all the time, and it'll distract me, and I'll just sit here cracking up as I'm trying to edit videos, put together thumbnails, do research, and I'm sitting here cracking up at you going at somebody. I mean, it's hilarious. So, glad you could be in here. Is coming for NIL, will most likely be here in 2025. Yeah, Day, I don't even know what it's going to look like because it could come from multiple different avenues, right? Like it could come from Congress, or it could just come from the Supreme Court finally looking at one of these cases and saying, we've had enough. Give it to us. And then they just rip them a new one. And I hope that's what it is, because that'd be fun for me, at least. Stone would be at Michigan State or Miami. Without Todd Bates, Stone would be at Michigan State or Miami. Could be. Top high school defensive players say OU equals forget him, hadn't played defense in 15 years. Look, don't get me wrong, Johnny. There is that notion that Oklahoma was not a defensive team, but that notion kind of goes out the window whenever you hire Brent Venables. So I hear you. You're not wrong. There is something that has to change. But that notion already started changing when you hire Brent Venables. And it's not like Brent Venables is a question mark as a defensive coordinator. I myself was sitting there before he got hired by Oklahoma, and many Alabama fans would sit there and say, what we need is for Brent Venables to get the hell away from Clemson. Because we don't want Dabo with Brent. Like that's a great coaching staff. They have the continuity. He's not going anywhere. They're building something. So, Missouri is kind of in a similar boat as well, Johnny, where it's not like I can sit here and tell you Missouri is some powerhouse for defense. I mean, goodness gracious, the team that's a powerhouse for defense that he looked at, the Georgia Bulldogs, that's not the team that I think is in the top two. I don't even think I think. Everybody thinks. So you're not wrong that there is this shift that must occur, but I think you and I probably disagree about how that shift is occurring. In my opinion, that shift already started occurring whenever they hired Brent Venables, and it's continuing to change. So true, but I don't think that that's as big of a deal as one may think, right? Because it's not like Missouri is a power in defense. The one power in defense he had was Georgia, and they're not in the top two. So, well, Johnny, that's not true because he orchestrated a really solid defense at Oklahoma as well before. So Venables is a guy, I mean, he's a very, 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 very bright defensive coordinator, a very, very, very gifted defensive coordinator. I think you and I are going to probably have to disagree there. Don't get me wrong. He hit the heights of his success with Dabo Swinney, but that's also because he went to a program that was running like a well-oiled machine with him there, with Bates. I mean, they had an unbelievable thing going over there at Clemson. So, yeah. Stone would be at Miami without Bates. I'm a hard lane for Stone to OU. Williams Nwaneri, I believe, will be down to the wire for signing day. And McKinley to OU. Nigel Smith, I like to OU as well, who should be a 5. Yeah, Nigel Smith is very talented. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think Nigel Smith does end up at OU. I just do. All right, let's keep it going, guys. Let's keep it going because this is, I mean, we can get in the weeds of this. There were some scrimmages this past weekend, right? And we need to talk about, first and foremost, unfortunate news coming out of College Station as a tight end for Texas A&M. Green. Hold on. Computer messing up. Okay, we're back. Unfortunate news for Texas A&M is tight end Donovan Green suffered a knee injury. It's being reported as an ACL, but I don't know that the results have come back. But it's being reported that he suffered a torn ACL on his knee during Saturday's scrimmage. That's a hit to the Aggies. Now, one thing we need to understand with Texas A&M, this is a huge year for Texas A&M. If we're sitting here and saying, give me teams in the SEC that this is a massive year. Right? We coined this for Texas, a show me year. You just need to show me we're moving in the right direction. What teams in the SEC would we qualify as this being a show me year? Certainly Missouri is up there, but certainly Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M might be everybody's first answer in terms of give me a team in the SEC where it's got to be a show me year. I think everybody, and rightly so, they're going to tell me first and foremost it's Texas A&M. They're the team that broke the record for the most talented recruiting class ever. They're the team that has been up and down. They've got to put it together. And I've had my fair share of criticisms for Texas A&M, for Jimbo Fisher. I will defend him here. They have had a lot of unfortunate injuries, a lot, like a crazy amount actually. And that's always tough. But this year, you come into the year with a former 5-star quarterback that played for you last year, gave you some things that you thought you could build off of. Showed that he's got the development there. He needs to continue developing, but if he continues going in the direction Texas A&M staff thinks he will go, he's going to be a very talented quarterback. Now, the one thing that I always point out with Texas A&M that nobody really talks about, they have an insanely talented wide receiver core. An insanely talented wide receiver core. Anaya Smith comes back. I mistakenly said in a video the other day that he had left to the NFL draft. That is my fault. Got to eat some crow on that one. I was thinking A-Chain to the NFL draft. Anaya Smith did not go to the draft. He comes back. He got hurt last year, and that was a huge blow to Texas A&M's offense because remember, that offense didn't move unless it went through Anaya Smith or Devin A-Chain. I said last year, I think midway through the season, Devin A-Chain was the most underrated player in all of college football. I stand by that. I absolutely stand by that because he was sensational at Texas A&M. He was unbelievable. So much fun to watch. Loved watching A-Chain play. He really put that team on his back when Anaya Smith went down. So this year, Texas A&M gets to have a receiving core that's going to include Anaya Smith, Evan Stewart, and Moose Muhammad as your big three. Guys, that is a very, very, very gifted wide receiving core. Evan Stewart is a guy, when he was coming out of high school at the time, he was a 4-star prospect. I went and watched him live. I came to all of you and said, that's the number one wide receiver in the nation. And personally, I don't know that it's close. He should be a 5-star. He ended up finishing as a 5-star, the number one wide receiver in the nation, because I was watching him do in 4- and 5-star defensive backs like it was nothing. He's very, very gifted. Moose Muhammad comes from a football family. His father, Muhsin Muhammad, played for Nick Saban at Michigan State and then went on to play in the NFL. So he certainly knows what to do. He comes from a football family. And then Anaya Smith is Anaya Smith. He's the veteran in that room. Having him back is going to be huge for Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad because now, God bless, you can't double him. And those are wide receivers that if you put them, I'll put it like this. If you put a Moose Muhammad, you put an Evan Stewart in that Oklahoma offense with Lebby, someone's doubling him. You put Evan Stewart, you give him to Steve Sarkisian, they're doubling him. Yeah, they're going to double him because that's the ability he brings to the table. I mean, he is a very technical route runner. Very excited to see what he does. But there is no doubt that this is a big hit. Not having Green there is a big hit. Now, we need to ask ourselves, where do they go from here? Now, one of the good things that Texas A&M did is they got active in the transfer portal. They did get a transfer from a LSU tight end, Johnson, who, by the way, Max Johnson's younger brother, Jake Johnson, transferred over there. And even more important than that, one of the players they have is from PPI Recruits. Now, for those of you that don't know, PPI Recruits, I think, is one of the coolest things in all of college football recruiting right now. PPI Recruits is an organization headed by Brandon Collier where he travels around the nation, not around the nation, I apologize. He travels around the world and finds prospects that he says, okay, they could play college football. Well, Theo Orstrom for Texas A&M, he's one of those dudes. He hasn't been around the game long, but if he starts figuring it out, he is uber gifted, a very talented player. So that's a guy I'm really interested in seeing if he takes the reins this year. But this is a big year for Jimbo Fisher. And so it's so unfortunate that this week, the week after all these scrimmages happen, we hear news that a player that looked to be a big part of that Texas A&M offense gets injured. Because if you're Jimbo Fisher, I hate to be repetitive, it's a show me year. And I don't think he's going to get fired. I think his agent is far too good for that. Jimmy Sexton got him a deal that, ladies and gentlemen, we all need a Jimmy Sexton in our lives. The longer it goes, the harder it is to get rid of him. I mean, that buyout's going to be legendary. And I've said this before. If they do crash and burn, you now as A&M run into an interesting problem because the coach that you go to hire after Jimbo, he's going to be asking for around Jimbo money. Because why wouldn't he? You fired a guy that you were paying $100 million. Let's keep numbers clean here, right? And these examples I give, I love keeping numbers clean. You fired a guy that you were giving $100 million and he was winning you 8 games. You're telling me we need you to win us 10 games. I think that's worth that same $100 million, if not $105 million, don't you? You're paying $100 million for 8 wins. Let's pay $105 for 10. A&M has put themselves in a fascinating position here now. And luckily, they have the money to be able to get out of this position, but I don't think they want to. Nobody's inclined to drop that kind of money. Point being, this is a big year for Jimbo Fisher. There's a reason why he brings in Bobby Petrino, and there's a reason why when Petrino gets in front of the stand and gives largely a nothing answer, saying, look, Jimbo's the boss. I'm here to make him happy. I'm here to do what the boss says. He says that takes social media by storm. And in a lot of ways, nothing he said was that crazy. How many of you are going out on a Friday night with your boss to the bar afterwards? You're there to do the job and get it done. But it's because of all of the craziness that we've seen with Texas A&M. It's because of all of the questions we have with Texas A&M that it gets made to be a bigger deal. Because of those contexts and nuances. So Texas A&M coming out of the scrimmage, they are absolutely a team we have got to watch because there's so much talent there. Are they going to take the next step? Is the offense finally going to look like a competent offense that one must fear? Because we talked about this on the SEC Connect. My biggest complaint with Jimbo Fisher, and then I'm going to move on. My biggest complaint with Jimbo Fisher is this. You're an offensive coach, but it seems like for the past 3-4 years, whenever we talk about someone is playing Texas A&M, we're not talking about the offense being what we're worried about. We're talking about the defense. We're sitting here saying, if the Texas A&M offense, they can get it together, they'll be interesting. But Texas A&M's defense, that's the one. They have this guy, and this guy. Now, the reason why I bring that to your attention, Nick Saban's a defensive coach. Nick Saban lost 2 games last year, and Paul Feinbaum is asking if his whole tenure is now tainted because he lost 2 games by a combined 4 points. And we are getting statements from Paul Feinbaum saying the legacy is tainted. If Nick Saban, a defensive coach, went a 4-year span where his defense was inept, but the offense was the only thing that carried Alabama, people would be calling for Nick's head. People say outlandish statements about Nick Saban off of 2 losses by 4 points. Now I want you to imagine that, like Jimbo's an offensive guy, but consistently for Texas A&M, it's the defense that has been better, and not just a little bit better, by a lot. If that was Alabama, if that was Texas, if that was any other school in the nation, it'd be done. It would be done. You're done. You're not here. And I know someone can tell me, but Ty, there were times where Alabama's offense ranked above the defense. Okay, so the offense was top 5 and the defense was top 10 or top 15. If your defense, if your calling card is offense like Jimbo and your defense is ranked top 5 and your offense is top 15, you're not going to hear a peep from me because your offense is one of the best. You just happen to field a defense that's awesome. That's unbelievable. But when your defense is a top 25, 30 defense and your offense ranks 97th in the nation, Nick Saban's legacy is tainted off of 2 losses by 4 points. But Jimbo is fielding an offense as an offensive-minded coach that ranks 97th in the nation. This is a big year for Jimbo. This is a big year for Texas A&M. People can say this is a big year for Alabama, and you are right because of the expectations that Alabama has created. They are not the same. They aren't. They are not the same. They're just not. And so whenever we talk about the guys or the teams in the SEC that we have got to be paying attention to, that it's a show me year, I think the first team we've got to acknowledge is Texas A&M. Secondly, we've got to acknowledge Missouri. If Missouri does not have a big year this year, if they don't even look like they're trending towards something positive, the heat under Drinkowitz's sit, it's going to turn up. There's no doubt about it. You know another team that I think is in a really interesting position, and I don't think that, once again, the coach is going to get fired, but Arkansas and Sam Pittman right now are at a really interesting impasse, and I'm going to tell you why. I like what they have, but KJ Jefferson is in his last year there. The defense there last year was not good. I'm hoping that that team can get more balance this year in Arkansas before KJ Jefferson leaves. Because they do have some talented guys that they're excited about behind KJ Jefferson. That's not the point. But right now, you have one of the better quarterbacks you've had in a while, a guy that has provided you so much consistency. And I myself must admit, I am a Sam Pittman fan. I don't know how you couldn't be. The guy just seems ready for college football games. I mean, he gets me ready for college football games. I want Arkansas to do well. But this is a big year for them. This is a very big year for them. You have KJ Jefferson. You have Rocket Sanders, who Rocket Sanders might be the most underappreciated college football player in the nation right now. One of the leading rushers in college football, and you don't hear anybody talk about Rocket Sanders. So Arkansas is another team that I think we need to turn our attention to and watch what they do, because they're going to be phenomenally fascinating to watch this year. Another team I'm going to give you, and this one's going to catch you by surprise. And when I say it's a team we need to watch, this one's for a little bit different reasons as the previous 3. And the first 2 being Missouri and Texas A&M. Those are the ones that probably need to show me the most, then followed by Arkansas. But you know a team that I'm very interested in watching? A team that I want to show me something? Not the team that I think that their coach will be on a hot seat or even that there will be any temperature changes on their seat, but South Carolina and Beamer. Guys, Beamer ball is looking like it's cooking in South Carolina. It's his last year with Spencer Rattler. Very excited to see what that looks like. Now, South Carolina did lose 2 big pieces to the transfer portal, the tight end, Jaheim Bell, and then they lost the running back. I would really be excited to see what they would look like if they were able to maintain those 2 pieces. But this is a big year for South Carolina, man. I mean, this is a big year for South Carolina. They've recruited well. They have recruited the Washington, D.C. area phenomenally well. In the previous class going into Washington, D.C., getting 5-star athlete Nicholas Harbor in the class of 2024, going into Washington, D.C., getting 5-star edge Dylan Stewart. So they are recruiting D.C. phenomenally right now. What does it look like? I mean, guys, if we're talking about teams where we are very excited to watch them, South Carolina's got to be up there for you, right? Especially for OU fans that are in here, as your team is transitioning from the Big 12 to the SEC. I can imagine a lot of you are going to be much more tuned in to SEC football this year, though the ones that are in here, you probably were tuned in before. Let's be honest. We all are a little bit fanatical about college football in this room right now. It's just the way it goes. But I can imagine there's going to be a lot more OU fans watching these SEC games. Now let's get to some Alabama, because Nick Saban had some interesting things to say at the podium after Alabama's scrimmage. And initially, there was a lot of worry on social media saying, oh, it's going to be a bad year for Alabama. Clint Lamb with On3 did something brilliant. Something that in argumentation, in debate, I love. A little bit of a bait and switch. Clint Lamb with On3 Sports posted a quote saying, it's hard to judge the quarterbacks right now because we have guys figuring something out. The wide receivers had drops. This happened, and this happened. And then at the end of it, he said, except this didn't come from Nick Saban. This came from Kirby Smart. After the same time period, right? And so I think the brilliance of what Clint Lamb did there was the problems that Alabama is having right now in fall camp are problems that you find all across college football. I will tell you the one area that concerns me, though. We're going to get very honest here. I have been a big fan of this Alabama wide receiving core for a while because I think the talent they have is there. I think if they can get it together, looking at the talent, be a very fun unit. But I don't care how talented you are, and I don't particularly care who the quarterback is. If you're not catching the ball, it matters for naught. I don't care if you made the defensive back do the splits, fall on his face, and now you're streaking down the sideline wide open with nothing but God staring at you. If you drop that football, it doesn't matter. I don't care how good of a route you run. I don't care what you do with the ball in your hands, because the ball has got to get to your hands. And right now, that is a problem for Alabama. The drops continue. The drops cost Alabama a national championship. It did. And drops is a lack of focus thing. Don't get me wrong. There are drops you can point to where you could be completely focused, and maybe the safety comes right over top as you're getting that ball in the breadbasket and just hits you. And you drop the ball. Hey, I'm going to pat you on the back and say, that's tough. Good play. Good try. Because that guy right there did everything in his. But if you're clean and that ball just goes right through your hands, it's a problem. And it's a problem we've seen from Alabama too many years now. I mean, this is going back to the national championship, the first one where Georgia beat them. Jamison Williams gets hurt, and Georgia, phenomenal game plan, but the opportunities were there. There's a reason why I myself never ascribed to the notion of, the only reason Alabama lost the national championship to Georgia is because Jamison Williams wasn't there or John Mechie wasn't there. Sure, those are reasons. We saw what those two guys did to Georgia the first time they played them, where Jamison Williams went crazy. The opportunities were still there. If the opportunities present themselves, you must take advantage, because opportunities do not come knocking 1,000 times. Alabama, without those guys, still had the opportunities to make things happen. It didn't happen. Why? Because of drops. Fast forward, last year, the Tide were undisciplined. They were all over the place. Drops reared their ugly head. Fast forward to this year, you don't have Bryce Young. You don't. You don't have Harry Houdini behind the center. And I truly believe that was Harry Houdini, by the way. Let me ask you all this. Have you ever seen Harry Houdini and Bryce Young in the same room? Didn't think so. Point, prove it. That's Harry Houdini. That guy is a legitimate magician. Bryce is sensational. You don't have him anymore. You're going to change your offense to be more quarterback friendly, quicker reads, but none of these quarterbacks have started. Do you want to know a way to derail a quarterback's confidence? If the guys they're throwing to, if the quarterback is doing everything right and the guy, he's hitting him right in the chest and that ball ends up on the ground time and time and time and time again. That just can't happen. And that right there is where Alabama is right now. Do I think it's something that is where you need to hit the alarm bells? No, but take note. Now, in other news, before we get out of here, we did hear something that I do find very interesting, and that's that a quarterback may be starting to take the reins. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you, once again, I have no inside information. I talk to people. I know what I know. But from everything we've heard from this scrimmage, it looks as though Jalen Milroe is starting to take the job. And this is something that Nick Saban said. The job isn't going to be given. It needs to be taken. Take it. It seems like Milroe might be in the process of taking it. And that's exactly what the team needs. They need someone to go in there with that swagger, with that confidence, and take it over. In a lot of ways, and it doesn't have to happen like this, but in a lot of ways, your quarterback is always going to be your leader, and it always just looks differently. But how the quarterback leads, right? That's important to a team. Jalen Milroe, if he is to take this job over and find that confidence, that's going to be big for the team. That's going to mean a lot for the team. Let's hit some comments because we've been on a little bit of a tangent, and I saw Bates, I apologize. Let's hit this right here. SBC Bates, thank you so much for the $5. He says the same people who bring up OU's lack of defense forget that the Big 12 teams put up the same amount of points on everybody else in bowl games. This is true. This isn't wrong. You're certainly not wrong there. The Big 12 offensively has been on the cutting edge. And I'll even take this a step further, Bates, because I think there's an interesting phenomena that happened in 2013. And for those of you, the astute observers will realize that's around the time whenever Texas A&M and Missouri moved from the Big 12 to the SEC. Now, personally, I am of the mindset that that's one of the best things to happen to the SEC. You want to know why? It made them evolve. You brought high-powered offenses into the SEC, a conference that was known for hard-nosed, 3 yards in the mud football. We're going to line it up, and you know we're running at you. We know that you know we're running at you. Who wants it more? That was SEC football. It was ferocious. It was messed up because everybody knew it was coming. Stop me. It was that mindset, and that's why I loved it so much. It's that mindset of we're on 4th and goal. You know what's coming. I know that you know what's coming. Show me. Stop me. But what they did do, whenever Missouri and A&M got to the SEC, they made the SEC change. All of a sudden, these two teams come in here with this high-powered offense, and the SEC teams weren't used to it. And then you remember Auburn started switching what they were doing, going a bit more higher tempo. Now you have those two Big 12 offenses come in, and it completely changed what the SEC had to do. It wasn't long after that Nick Saban hires Lane Kiffin and says, hey, I'm at the top of college football, but I need to change. And that right there is when I realized Nick Saban might be the greatest coach of all time. Understanding the willingness to change. That's phenomenal. Being that high up in terms of where you rank and then being like, hey, we need to change because this isn't working. So SBC, I love this point, right? I do love this point because there's multiple different things that we have to acknowledge within the Big 12. A lot of the coaching in the Big 12 has been really, really good in terms of like theory, right? Like the theory that's being brought out schematically, it's been really, really good. So that's something we have got to watch. But great point. It's tough to say the defenses have been the problem, though the defenses haven't been great. I think we can all come to an agreement here. But offensively, they were awesome. Mizzou and A&M forced the SEC to change. JB, And it's bigger than Mizzou and A&M because college football was moving towards this new modern offense, and the Big 12 embraced it very, very early on. But Missouri and A&M accelerated the rate at which the SEC had to change because the SEC, for good reason, thought we're the Premier League. Why do we need to change? And then they had some teams come in there and say, hey, you need to change because college football is changing. And you can stay like this. We'll see what it happens. And it was great for the SEC. In my opinion, it's one of the best things to happen to the SEC because then you went from I-form basic offenses that were effective to now you're running RPOs. I mean, just look at the offenses in the SEC. Was it always going to go to that direction? Yes, it was always going to end up there. But in my opinion, there is no question that Texas A&M and Missouri accelerated the rate in which the SEC got to where they are now. They made the SEC better because they made the SEC adjust and modernize to the modern offenses, which in turn modernized their defenses. If you're going to run a modern offense every day in practice, you're going to figure out some things that you need to change defensively. It was always going to happen. They accelerated it. I think that's a very important point, right? That game was wild, JB. No doubt about it. That game was just wild. They had prepared for the other quarterback and then walks out. Yeah, that's just unbelievable. Wild game, no doubt. Thank you, Kim. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. It's been an hour. Guys, if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button. It really helps content creators get picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm, and not just me. If you leave here and then you go watch another YouTube content creator that you love, not even in the college football sphere, those likes, those comments, they mean so much because YouTube, they can see that there's a lot of people in here watching, but it's based off of that interaction. The more interaction content creators get, the more YouTube is willing to put their content on the front page. It allows us to keep going, keep growing, and be able to do this full time, which that's where we're working towards. We're so close to being there. Hopefully going to start some channel memberships because I do want to be able to move this into a full-time career, be able to make this more professional. That's the aim of the show. So hop down to the comments. Let me know what y'all are thinking. We're going to be sticking around for this Winery commitment. But until then, we'll see you tonight, 5:30 Central Standard Time on our regular live stream. Tomorrow we'll be uploading some content. The next time I'll see y'all for Through the Haze will be Wednesday, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Can't wait till then. That's it. See ya.